customer experience management has faced considerable disruption over the past year, and this has been especially challenging for small and medium-sized enterprises. Running a CX operation in an emerging business is challenging at the best of times, and in many ways very different from what's associated with national campaigns. Today we hear from Shannon Burch, the Director of Customer Contact Centers at Western Financial Group based in Calgary, Alberta. Shannon has held multiple executive CX roles at a variety of organizations, from large multinationals to small boutique firms, over the course of the past 2 decades. In this interview, Shannon explains the main dynamics of running a contact center for a growing company and how these compare and contrast with handling a CX operation for a countrywide enterprise. All right, Shannon Burch, welcome to the CX Files. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy day to join us for a discussion around customer experience.
Well, thanks, Peter, for having me.
You're more than welcome. It's great to have you on the show. And I'd probably like to start out, Shannon, by talking a little bit about the standpoint that you've got. You've got a very unique position in our industry. You have been responsible for customer experience operations that have been for some of the largest organizations in Canada, as well as now you've moved over to an organization running a contact center that's perhaps more on the emerging side. Maybe a good point to start out from would be if you could talk a little bit about the challenges of running a CX operation for a smaller growing company relative to what those might be like as compared to when you were responsible for some of the more larger CX opportunities or operations within the scope of Canadian customer experience.
You know, it's a really great question because I've been really blessed to be able to have that perspective from both. And I'd say one of the biggest challenges is generalist versus specialist. So when you're in the big organizations, we could have specialized teams that really their knowledge was deep in a particular area, and we can push calls directly to them. But in a smaller organization, everybody has to be able to answer all calls because you don't have enough people in order to, we're still covering 4 time zones, right? You still have hours of business that extend past your traditional bricks and mortar business. So you have to have shifts and workforce management. And so to be able to have small call volumes in specialized areas, you just cannot schedule that effectively. So I think the generalist versus specialist, which has an impact on CX, right? Customers are very complex questions nowadays, and they want that specialized, very deep knowledge. And how do you get that out of a small number of people and then particularly as you're trying to grow them and trying to grow the numbers, and then how do you build deep knowledge or make it easy for them to get knowledge at the same time that you're expanding the number of calls because you're opening it up to more customers.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. And, from the standpoint of the provision of customer experience, I'd like to shift to the dynamic about captive versus outsourced. Now, we do know that historically, I think there's been a perception out there that the outsourcing community is focused heavily on going after the whales or the big beasts or the big accounts out there. And that makes a lot of sense. Volume counts when it comes to third-party service delivery. But one of the things, Shannon, that we've been picking up on in the research at the CX Files as well as at Ryan Strategic Advisory is that smaller to medium-sized enterprises seem to be much more in focus amongst the BPO players. Now, that's, I think, a really good facet because I think it demonstrates the importance that small to medium-sized organizations have in terms of growing elements of the economy and the importance that CX is placed within the scope of these different types of enterprises. But maybe if you could talk a little bit about what you feel an outsourcer has to do in order to be relevant to an organization that's emerging and is putting a focus on customer experience. In your view, based on the role that you've taken on recently, what do you think makes a great partner for a growing or an emerging enterprise when it comes to CX third-party delivery?
Yeah, it's a great thing. I probably do look for different things with this contact center than I did when I had partners in the large sites. I think innovation. I think also being a partner to come with suggestions on how to enhance CX, and knowing that efficiency is still really important, but obviously efficiency doesn't have the same big bang when you have a small number of people as it does, from a cost savings when you do have a large number of people. And so, in the industry, I think then when they're focusing on this, like how we enhance the customer experience, because we know that has a direct impact on the bottom line, and those kind of partnerships that can grow and evolve with us, I think are the ones that make a big difference in the medium to small contact centers.
In your opinion, is a medium to small contact center on the enterprise side, is it more perhaps going to be in line with a provider that's of the same size, or do you feel that this is agnostic? Could a large scale provider, a large scale global provider, potentially go after the business of a smaller enterprise and be successful at it?
I think that either can be successful. In my network of BPOs, I find that they all definitely have pivoted to be much more about customer experience. So if you bring that to the table for a small player, I think that's super important. I think the challenge though, when you have a large organization, just like when I worked in a large organization, smaller partnerships can fall through the cracks, and you've got to be really careful about that happening in this environment, right? Because a small provider will need to move quickly if they're not getting what they need out of a partnership. So I don't think size has anything to do with it. I think it's about your determination to serve that niche of customer, right? And maybe you have specialized people within those large organizations that focus on small and medium, because I think it would be hard to, work, I used to be at Scotia. So if somebody has a Scotia account and the Western account, I'm pretty sure one of them is going to get more favored, right? But if you have more like accounts that are more the same size as Western, I think that's pretty cool.
So really what we're saying here is that the orientation of a particular individual who's responsible for a series of different deployments or campaigns can really count a lot. And I think that stands to reason, not just in the provision of service delivery, but also from the standpoint of technology. And we can all agree that in CX, technology has taken on a life of its own the past several years. I can remember when I got into this whole game, the whole discussion was about where you could deliver the largest number of agents from at the cheapest price. And it's a completely different ball game at this point. I think we can all agree with that, regardless of the size of the organization. But that leads to a question, Shannon, from the standpoint of what you've experienced in your roles, both within large organizations, but more specifically for smaller emerging enterprise contact centers. What do you see as the role of technology in facilitating customer experience as you're looking to try and grow perhaps your base of consumers from a regional sense all the way through to a national sense?
Yeah, so I think technology plays a similar role, doesn't matter on your size, right? Efficiency, effectiveness, ability to really focus on the customer and providing that experience that makes them feel very personalized. So whether they're working with a automated system or a chat bot, and then eventually moving into an agent as required, that is similar. What I think is different in a smaller organization is maybe having that in-house expertise. And so a partner that can bring together experts so that CX experience becomes enhanced for the smaller organization. That's something that we would definitely be looking for, because that expertise doesn't sit inside the organization, but customers expect it, right? Customer that deals with us or deals with Uber or deals with Starbucks or deals with a large multinational bank, they all expect the same things now when it comes to technology.
And this is what I think is really interesting. The customer, the end user, really is agnostic in terms of the organization they're dealing with. They just expect that you're going to have it. They are expecting that the organization's going to have it in place. But one of the things I've also noticed is, especially amongst a lot of the smaller enterprise contact centers that I've been dealing with, there's also a very progressive sense in terms of how technology has to intersect with the agent and how the agent
Mhm.
manages the consumer. And I don't know about you, but I've seen that there's been a tendency amongst many of these smaller contact centers to want to almost leapfrog into the latest technology and be ahead of the curve because of the fact there's a perception that perhaps larger organizations have got the right technologies in place, but are only going so far in terms of making sure that everything works properly together.
Yeah, I think that when you're, particularly if you're expanding and growing the contact center in an organization, you really have that opportunity to do that, right? There, there's probably been underinvestment in the contact centers in smaller organizations. You have limited capital, as you do in big organizations, but the movement towards a contact center may have been slower. And now we know customers demand having many choices on the channels that are available to them. So I think that leapfrogging into the latest technology is a little bit easier because you're in the mode of growing. And what I've seen is just a shift in investment going into channels that are more virtual than bricks and mortar, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's an important element that you touch on in the sense that there's very clearly a sense now amongst consumers that we do have choices. And
Yes.
if a provider of whether it's financial services or telecommunications or e-commerce or healthcare, it doesn't matter the industry, that if you're not up to speed or if you're not where you need to be, we do know it's easier than ever to find another provider. And that leads to a really interesting question because as I mentioned at the beginning of the outset of the discussion, there's a real view amongst so many that it's smaller, more ambitious, emerging organizations that are really disrupting no matter what sector of the economy. So going into 2021, considering all the issues that we had in 2020 in terms of the economy and the health related matters that we've all been suffering, what do you see as the key customer experience dynamics for emerging enterprises as they look to try and continue disrupting and winning new end users, customers into their remit?
Yeah, I think this is probably where small to medium-sized businesses might have an advantage over those really large organizations. Is, we can probably agree that everybody in the world has gone through sort of a trauma this year, right? It's the first time ever that such a trauma has happened globally, and everybody's impacted. And so what we've noticed is customers certainly want just some reassurance, right? They love the convenience. So you have to have this opportunity to provide, some automation, some self-service options. But when a customer doesn't want that technology anymore, you got to be ready to be there with this, really empathetic experience that just builds trust and makes that person feel comfort. Whatever it is that they need to feel comfort and trust that they're okay, right? We're really seeing that. And in a smaller organization, I think it is much easier to get consistency in that experience than it is in a larger one, would be my experience. It's way easier to get a couple hundred people, or in my case right now, 35 people doing the same thing than it was when I was running a team of 500,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that is a benefit and something that customers are certainly looking for in 2021. So we are not only doing that from a human behavioral part, but then trying to complement that with technology that makes that easier, right? I think, gone are the days of expecting an agent to have 5 or 6 different screens open and having to pop back and forth in order to get the right, conversation engagement with a customer. And today we need to make that simpler for them, and we need to make it easier to find knowledge and that automation from the bot into the contact center to be seamless. And I think smaller organizations have an advantage to get that done quicker.
Well, it strikes me that within a smaller organization going into 2021, there'll be a lot less bureaucracy, a lot fewer stakeholders, and a lot
Hmm.
more potential to align the stakeholders that do need to take a decision in terms of ensuring that the agents are well equipped, that the right technologies are in place, and there's a clear understanding in terms of when an automated transaction needs to go into a live agent in order to carry through and ensure fulfillment.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, I think somewhat like if I look at my own call flows or like my customer journey maps, they're way simpler, and we've made them way simpler because there is less bureaucracy around what exactly has to happen. We really focus on the customer and less about business needs and stuff like that, knowing that it will all work itself out if we take really good care of the customer. And that definitely is a different and an advantage, I think, for 2021, because I get this sense that humans in general would like some simplicity in 2021 and just feel grounded that we're going to move forward and make it through all of this.
That's it. Well, very good food for thought. Shannon, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with the CX Files today. Good luck finishing out the rest of the year, and certainly all the best for 2021.
Yeah, same to you, Peter.
Thanks for downloading the CX Files podcast. If you have a moment, please give us a star rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, because this really helps other people to find the podcast. If you have any suggestions for future guests, or ideas, people or topics, then please just find myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan on LinkedIn and send a suggestion.